You're listening to the Moose and the Loose, your 10 minutes action-packed financial podcast with your host, Mike Yahoo.
Hey, Market Moose! How are you doing? This is Mike from the Moose on the Loose. I hope you are doing well for this Retirement Friday. Today I want to talk about some crunching numbers. What if you could retire 5 years earlier? What would you do for an extra 5 years of retirement? That would be crazy, right? So sometimes it's not that crazy to think, and running multiple scenarios could actually lead you to see what an extra year of work would translate into your retirement, or vice versa. One extra year of retirement could mean for your retirement budget. And the only way to know at which stage is best for you to retire is to start by running multiple simulations. We do this at Retirement Loop. Actually, if you want to subscribe to the wait list to be the first to know when we reopen our doors at Retirement Loop, you can subscribe for free for the wait list at moosemarkets.com/retirement. So what we have done so far at Retirement Loop, one of the best thing actually about this community, on top of having help from each other and so on, is the access to a complete Excel spreadsheet. It's more like a software than anything else. You don't need to know Excel. You just need to be able to open an Excel spreadsheet and then fill up the form. But you can run multiple scenarios. You can maximize your budget. You can maximize your estate. You can try a whole bunch of things, and we have optimizers on that. And what I did before recording this podcast is I just tried a case study and made the difference between retiring at the age of 65 versus the age of 60 to see what would be the impact and how I can modify this to make it work a little bit better moving forward. So in the case study that I've selected, and there's a bunch of numbers, but that's not important. So you just have to start with what is the maximum budget you can spend if you retire at the age of 65 and you plan on dying with $0 at the age of 100. So in that case, the maximum budget was $85,000. That's a lot. That's great. But keep in mind that the number is not important, is the variations that are important. So then you can apply it to your case. So in that case today, the maximum that that couple was able to retire on was $85,000 plus inflation, of course. If they would have retired at the age of 60 instead, the budget goes from $85,000 to $70,000. So 5 years of working more will give you $15,000. So that's more than $1,000 a month to spend more at retirement. So that is enough to think about it. Of course, when you look at this budget, probably that a lot of you would say, well, Mike, I could easily retire on $70,000 a year. So I would definitely pick that one at the age of 60 instead of 85. And that would be super happy. And what is even more interesting is when you look at the variation from one year to another. So rough calculation, of course, $15,000 difference, 5 years, roughly every year that you work more gives you $3,000 more. And that's pretty much it. If that couple would have retired at the age of 61, the budget would have cranked up to almost $73,500. So 73, 400 something. So what's interesting here is if you can sacrifice a few dollars in your budget, well, you can retire a lot earlier. The thing that if you do this, you need to change a few things though moving forward, because retiring earlier also means that you will be living off your portfolio and other sources of income for a longer period of time. So you have less time to accumulate and more time to spend. So you might be thinking about transferring a little bit more risk. So by transferring risk, I mean, If everything is under your control, you have your portfolio, that's great, but all the risks are on your shoulders. So by transferring some risk, maybe by buying an annuity or postponing CPP and OAS until the age of 70, so then you're transferring the risk to the life insurance company in the case of an annuity, or to the government in the case of CPP and OAS. So that could be an interesting way if you plan on retiring earlier. Well, then you could try to think, well, as I age, I might not want to have all the burden of generating income from the portfolio that I have and be vulnerable to a very bad stock market for several years, because we never know if it could happen again. By transferring a part of that risk to somebody else, which would be the government or which be the life insurance company. Of course, it's not perfect. For example, government benefits, they will follow the inflation. We talked about that last week. The inflation calculated by the government and your personal inflation might definitely not be the same thing. So yes, you will have kind of like an annuity that is indexed, but not necessarily fully indexed to your needs. You also lose on flexibility. That is something very important to manage as well. The other thing that you have to consider is if you retire before the age of 65, chances are your CPP is actually going to be lower as well. So of course, it's all a matter of like how much you want to spend, how much you need, and how much you want to enjoy life. Because sometimes, I mean, just enjoying life is a lot more important than just working on a job that you hate, depending on the situation, of course. So this is something that is really important to take in consideration. Another thing that I like to do when I do those calculations is also to do everything I could so I do not have to simulate the sale of the main property in the calculation. Why? Because I use this as the ultimate cushion, like the safety net. So yes, you plan on dying with $0 in your portfolios, but if you always have your house as an asset, it's a very solid backup plan. Because if your plan can work and you die at 0 at 100 years old, well, if the market doesn't cooperate, if inflation is higher than expected, well, you always have the possibility of selling your house. And let's be realistic, chances are that in your 80s, during the slow go getting towards the no-go phase, chances are you're going to sell your house, right? And by selling your house, you're going to have an extra source of income that is coming up. So that could help you retiring earlier if you have that as a safety net. Yes, you could optimize to really die with 0, and using the spreadsheet that we have, you can decide to just put like a specific amount of dollars that you want to die with. So you can decide to die at like 95 or 100, but the point is you can say, well, I plan to sell my house at the age of 80, but then I want to have a cushion of like a minimum of $300,000 when I die at 100 years old. Keep in mind, if you're like 60 today, $300,000 in 40 years from now, not going to be worth a lot if you factor in inflation, right? So always keep that in mind as well. But you can play around those things, because I don't think it would be safe to just assume that you're going to sell your house, that you're going to spend all your money, and then that you're going to die with 0, with no buffer. Maybe you could run into some serious concerns in your 80s or 90s if you happen to live a lot longer than expected, or if the stock market doesn't go the way you wanted. So to know if you can retire 5 years earlier, I would actually do the target year and then like run the simulation 4 years earlier, 3 years earlier, 2 years earlier, 1 year earlier, just to see what would be the scope of what you can retire with and the type of budget. And again, in that situation, the difference was like $15,000 a year. I mean, honestly, I could definitely retire with $70,000 with my wife, probably with a lot less actually. So I would feel very comfortable like just cutting 5 years. But maybe then what I would do, if it was my case, is trying to retire even earlier than 60 and see what it would look like to retire at the age of 58 or 56. But again, you also put more pressure on your portfolio. You're going to have like smaller CPP and CPP benefits. If you want to buy an annuity, it's going to cost you a lot more, or in another sense, you're going to get a lot less from your investment because this will cover a longer period. So all of those things needs to be considered when you play around a retirement simulator. So again, if you are interested in knowing more about Retirement Loop, into getting help into that retirement planning phase where you transition into retirement, you can subscribe for free for the waitlist. We're going to also produce some interesting freebies that will help you guide you through your retirement. So you go to moosemarkets.com/retirement. moosemarkets.com/retirement. So, all right, Moose, that's enough for today. I'm going to take off for the weekend. It's going to be good for my voice, and I'm going to come back on Monday, and we are going to do a quick earnings review talking about TFI International, Waste Connections, and CCL Industries. All right, stay tuned and stay invested.
Hey, welcome to the disclaimer. If you're listening to The Moose and the Loose, you cannot really expect me to give you buy or sell recommendation or financial advice, right? You're here for fun, you're here for information and some entertainment. But I am not your financial advisor, I am not your broker, so therefore I'm not liable if you're losing money after listening to the podcast. If you're looking for some advice, go see a professional. If not, you can enjoy the show and do your due diligence after it.